Hello everyone who likes to play as a rogue in video games. Get it? I am Border, also known as BorderRRR, and roguelikes are one of my favorite types of games to play. But if you think about it, roguelikes are kind of a weird genre of game to enjoy, and there are moments where I wonder why I play them at all. They are, on the whole, a very good example of bad ideas that still work very well in practice. And so this video is basically a rundown of 3 of those, well, if not so much ideas, but features that roguelikes have, and the good and the bad side of them. And a brief definition before we get started, for anyone who perhaps doesn't know, a roguelike is just any game, typically a role-playing game of some kind, with procedural level design, where failure, or death, sends you back to the very start and resets your progress. This whole genre is named after the game Rogue, which was originally released in 1980, which amazingly is still being played and updated to this very day. The similar, and actually far more popular, Roguelite is much the same, except there is permanent progression between different attempts to beat the game, or runs, as it's generally called. And now that's out of the way, let's think about why it may take a second thought to describe why this particular gameplay loop is actually fun. You might think that roguelikes, do they waste your time? There is no way around it. Roguelikes require persistence. There is pretty much no roguelike that you will beat on the first try if you go in blind. The central gameplay loop is trying, failing, and then trying again until you succeed or you give up. And then doing it all again, assuming you haven't given up. Actual roguelikes have no progression between attempts either, while the far more popular roguelite, as mentioned before, at least gives you a sense of progress and reward as you go along. Now, the reason to hate this kind of thing is that since it's not guaranteed satisfaction, especially with the randomness and chance-based modifiers that roguelikes almost always have, people who play video games for escapism, remember, this is a video game, it's optional, there's no obligation to ever touch these things. They might not appreciate the cruel twists of fate that are a staple of the roguelike experience. Sometimes you fail, and it's not even your fault, which, rather distressingly, is quite like real life. So why spend time with something, a recreational activity, that requires you to suffer the feeling of failure over and over again? Well, speaking purely for myself, I love it anyway because rare success, in the face of great adversity, is success that feels sweeter. And having the odds stacked against you makes it all the more satisfying when you do succeed, even if it's only one small victory at a time in the case of roguelites. Done correctly, a roguelike can also have an excellent sense of high stakes if the run isn't going well, because there's always a chance of your own skill pulling you through. And repeated attempts also make the eventual goal of beating the game feel worthy, and means that you can be continually lured back in with the promise of next time for sure, which, honestly, that's like most video games. But on the topic of persistence, one potential thing that might put people off from roguelikes is the idea that, are they too difficult? Are they too hard? Roguelites are challenging games, almost by default, because if they're too easy, they're essentially just short, uninteresting RPGs, let's be honest with that. If the player is not failing repeatedly, they can't try repeatedly either, which breaks the core gameplay loop of persistence in the face of repeated resets. And the reason people might not like this is that difficult games are really not everyone's cup of tea. And I have a strong suspicion that the silent majority of people who play video games would rather not play something relentlessly difficult. Everyone has their own threshold for what is acceptable difficulty, and roguelikes possibly are beyond the average of what people are willing to put up with. And the type of difficulty matters as well. It depends on the individual roguelike game, of course, but generally, quick reflexes and quick thinking, a good memory, and most of all, bloody-minded stubbornness are all things that roguelikes tend to require in order to beat them. And something you could really it's something you could ask of any hard game. Why would you spend the time honing an essentially useless skill when you could find enjoyment in something else, like reading a book or watching Netflix or something? But why I love roguelikes anyway, despite their difficulty, is like it's just with the time investment. Difficulty makes eventual success all the sweeter. As mentioned, an easy or casual roguelike is almost a contradiction and an impossibility. A minimum threshold of difficulty is required for the main gameplay loop to occur. And that same difficulty is also what makes roguelikes engaging. You are, in pretty much every roguelike, a rogue. Someone who stands alone, someone who forges their own path, and the odds are stacked against you. The gameplay essentially serves as partial narrative for these things. You are on your own, and you're against a hostile world. And your eventual victory is all the more satisfying for having fought so hard and so long to earn it. Far more than most other genres of games, although I'm sure people could list a whole bunch of game genres in which there's a similar feeling of prolonged persistence to achieve satisfying success. But one of the reasons it takes so long is the learning, and that's the final thing that you can aim at roguelites with a accusatory finger. Is the learning curve too steep, generally? And this is part of the difficulty of roguelikes, is how each one is essentially unique. It is a genre with great variations in the styles of gameplay. It ranges from turn-based deck builders like Slay the Spire to first-person shooters like Ziggurat and RoboQuest. And this staggering variety requires the roguelike connoisseur to learn the specific functions and strategies of each game individually in order to have any chance of success. And the reason people might not like this is, well, similar to the difficulty. Why learn something so unnecessary for something so specific? Learning is an emotional and intellectual investment after all. It takes effort. This question could be aimed at video gaming as a whole, really, but it's especially prevalent for a genre in which failure is expected. It is understandable as to why it might not appeal to someone to learn the handholds of a very steep cliff if you're all but guaranteed to fall back down multiple times anyway. And also the only thing on top of the cliff is a sign saying a winner is you. Honestly, at this point, I could be talking about games inspired by Dark Souls, and a lot of it would probably still fit. I would still be describing that genre of game. But why I love roguelikes in particular anyway is learning is fun. And if you're the kind of person who enjoys the process of gaining new knowledge or skills, the actual relevance of the knowledge or usefulness of the skills is less important than the nice tingly feeling you get when you figured something out. And roguelikes in particular, ones which are designed really well and, built really well. There's all kinds of fun little secrets and synergies and strategies and tactics and little quirks of them that are a joy to discover as you go through them. And every game, and every roguelike in particular, is like a labyrinth with its own twists and turns to memorize and master. It's effectively a new lock for an adventurous rogue to lockpick. It is satisfying for the same reason a crossword puzzle is. Using knowledge gained feels good, even if the task at hand isn't an essential one. You don't need to know every word in the English language, but it is fun to fill out the crossword with the obscure ones that you do happen to know. Likewise, putting the knowledge you gain through playing a roguelike to the test in order to ultimately beat that final boss is a very satisfying buzz for me in particular. So that's it. Now that I've shared my thoughts on roguelikes and why people might love or hate them, or avoid them, or embrace them, please do share your thoughts on what makes roguelikes fun for you, or not fun for you as the case might be. And thank you all so much for watching. Please like and comment, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time in whatever roguelike comes next, because I love to play them. Farewell!